You're listening to Leading L&D, the podcast that brings you insights, strategies, and stories from the people at the forefront of learning and development in the corporate world. I'm Adrian West, and today we will be talking with Michael Grant of AICPA. Michael, thanks for joining us today. We really want to welcome you to Timely Techs.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed your friendship these years.
It's been a great ride. It's been great getting to know you and all the wonderful people at Timely Techs as well.
Well, it's been a privilege knowing you for these years and seeing the impressive progression of your career, the trajectory from a team leader to where you are now. From our initial encounter back in the days when we met at ATD and you eventually became chapter president, to your roles with the Association of International Certified Public Accountants. Yes. Today, you've garnered the respect of many leaders right here in the Research Triangle Park, and dare I say, even internationally. So congratulations for that.
I appreciate that.
Your 20-year professional journey is really, truly commendable. And during your tenure at AICPA, you started stepping out of the lead instructional design position into your senior director position now, where you run the whole shooting match over there for training, learning, and development. I'm particularly impressed by your willingness to give back and to do things like this. And when we broached the idea of doing a podcast together, you even suggested a topic, that being make, buy, or partner for training assets. I welcome your insights into that question.
Sure, let's do it.
Considering AICPA's L&D function as a profit center, how does that influence your decisions on making, buying, or partnering for training assets?
It has a tremendous amount of influence on the decisions that I make and my team makes in a lot of different ways. So many of us learning and development professionals have worked for organizations that are focused on workplace development, right? So workforce development, internal staffs, upskilling and preparing them for different roles, product knowledge, skills, et cetera, and so forth. So what's unique about our role at AICPA and SEMA, we affectionately call it the association, is that we are a revenue generating business unit. So our members have to earn 40 hours of CPE a year, but we don't mandate that they purchase it from us or acquire it from us. And so there's a competitive nature to our business in which we've got to stay on the cutting edge of learning trends and best practices for creating learning for our members, students, members and students globally.
Given that you're a profit center, how do you manage the financial aspects of the collaborations with other external partners?
That's right. So COGS is a big concept, right? It's cost of goods sold. So essentially, what will it cost our organization to make a product that we then sell for revenue generating purposes? And so we think about margins and we think about expenses. And you want the best margin and you want the lowest amount of expenses, right? And so there's a lot of creative approaches that learning providers can take now more than ever. And so, when you think about having an integrated approach to building your ecosystem of learning, whether it's tools, whether it's people, staff, skills, and that's something that a lot of organizations are typically struggling with is, do we bring in people as full-time employees, or do we kind of borrow the skills that are needed to achieve our strategic business goals? So, for example, do we recruit, from a staffing agency, or do we post and try to explore the world of like Upwork.com or Fiverr, where we can try to identify talented people around the world that we can reach out to and sign up as an independent contractor and generate a statement of work in which we pay them short-term, project by project as an independent contractor. There's a lot of flexibilities. I've got a lot of anecdotal stories in my 11 years at the AICPA and SEMA and building these different learning solutions, whether they're on-demand modality, whether they're self-study, in different ways, on-sites, custom builds. So when we think about curriculum design conundrums, and so this is a presentation that I've given at some different industry conferences, and we've had a lot of interest in this topic because a lot of learning leaders, learning managers, training and development managers, a lot of different types and nuances to titles globally in organizations. But at the end of the day, we're trying to think about talent and how do we upskill and reskill talent, whether they're members of an association that have to pay for ongoing professional development, continuing education, continuing professional education credits. Sometimes it's called different things in different professions, right? But most credentialed professionals have to earn some type of ongoing continuing education credits. But so for those providers, it's the conundrum of, do we build internally these learning solutions, maybe on-demand courses, virtual sessions, podcasts, webcasts, conference sessions that we might facilitate, or do we partner, or do we buy? What can we buy? What should we build internally, and what could we maybe partner or collaborate on? And so, for example, with the partner side, when you think about different vendors that you might already have, maybe there's a platform or a technology that you pay for, that you pay to use. I'm a fan of cloud-based tools,
Okay.
for what we create in on-demand learning. It just provides a lot more flexibility than some of the desktop applications that are, typically popular. A lot of L&D professionals might use some of those more desktop, rapid e-learning authoring tools. We use a lot of those popular tools as well. But we're a fan of cloud-based, especially with, hybrid workforce, remote workforce, and then the possibility, and this is important, Adrian, for those watching in L&D, to be able to assign a license to a cloud-based tool for production development to independent contractors. Because if you use software that has to be installed by your company's IT department, there's typically some complications if you are trying to leverage an outside external independent contractor.
Well, I imagine there's been a lot of learning curve for you involved in that, notwithstanding the fact that you have a lot to bring to bear with regard to accounting functions and that sort of thing. Making your cost of goods sold less than your ultimate profit has
Right.
got to be part of the goal.
Absolutely. So when we think about soft skills, which, now there's the big debate of how do we flip that and rephrase that to maybe power skills, human intelligence skills, essential skills, power skills. I've heard all of these different variations and alternatives to it. But at the end of the day, when you look at the World Economic Forum and their research, and what they're saying are the top 10 to 20 skills of now and of the future, one of the big factors that organizations are really striving for is this whole concept of learning at the speed of change. Organizations globally that can learn at the speed of change are going to have a competitive advantage over everyone else in their vertical.
Well, you must have seen your share of change growing to an organization of over 700,000 members. Your audience internationally has a lot to do and rely on you to try and stay up to date.
That's right. And so that's a big factor when we choose our vendor partners.
Okay.
And we've made some really good decisions over the last few years in terms of vendor partners that have a lot of reach, that have international facilities and access to international facilities and talent and operations, so that, to your point, because we serve a global audience across global regions, variations in international accounting laws and standards and policies, we've got to be able to offer localized learning and
Okay.
have the ability to cast actors for film production in some of our learning modules that can, provide a global appeal to our global audience, while also being able to figure out how to customize learning, especially our on-demand experiences, so they can branch. So our learners, members can branch in
Okay.
an on-demand experience, and being able to, think about translation, right? And thinking about subtitles and, some of the different norms and preferences across the global regions, and being able to accommodate and be agile with the evolution of our learning innovation team.
So part of your partnering then has to be with your own organization
Yes.
in disparate locations around the globe.
That's right. And we have regional vice presidents across all of the different continents. And so that intelligence is very important from a strategy perspective, because in some cultures they prefer mobile learning, especially if, there's some issues with the infrastructure and bandwidth, right? And electricity. And so mobile learning is something that, we made sure were in the requirements for, some of the new digital platforms that we've implemented recently. The ability to provide offline learning, mobile learning, to accommodate for those cultures and regions that prefer synchronous learning. So cohort learning is big, it's on the rise, it's a big trend in L&D, and being able to have portals that can be created quickly internally, where we could even load in courses and content that we might buy from a provider. And when you think about these power skills, maybe that's the phrase that I'll use, a lot of that is on the market pretty widely. And so you can purchase a lot of courses on topics such as like conflict resolution, communication skills.
That makes sense.
Negotiation. Why would you try to, build that internally when, that's so widely available on the marketplace, where you can even load that content that you could buy into your digital delivery platform.
And especially since a lot of that is not specific to your audience.
Exactly. It's not specific to the audience, but it is important, and it could be a good companion to some more content that is maybe more specific to your organization, your industry, in which you could use internal subject matter experts. And, when we think about voiceover narration, there's another kind of anecdotal, component of learning production that we tried to solve for in creative ways. So, for example, we reached out to people in our contact center, staff in our contact center that had good speaking voices.
Okay.
And so it was great, because they were able to get a break from their kind of standard job and standard role of, talking on the phone to our members and helping them to, solve issues right when they call in, and they could take a break and come to our studio, where we converted, an old office in our building, and made an investment into some equipment, to do some video recordings, audio recordings in-house. And so we built an internal voiceover narration team, and it went very well. And so now, we've got that, where we kind of just exploring those that have versatility, where I might have this role, but I've got a good speaking voice, or I might have this role, but I'm a good project manager and I have an interest in upskilling. So surveying your internal assets within an organization is important, because you may find out that you don't need to even contract some skills. You just might need to allow some flexibility with internal employees to maybe go on a secondment, or be able to get it approved to take on a stretch project. So all types of creative ways and approaches to build, buy, and then potentially even partner for curriculum design initiatives.
Well, I can imagine that in your business there are rock stars or recognized experts around the globe. Do you recruit from your audience for some of that talent?
Absolutely. We go to our own conferences that we sponsor, right? And with over 700,000 members and students globally, we put on a lot of conferences. We collaborate with that team to be able to review that database and identify who's an expert. Where are the list of experts for X different topics? So we can scan that. We also think about different authors and thought leaders on social media when we think about reach. That is another factor is, how can we get the most reach and investment, right? Return on investment, ROI. When we think about, those that we could even include as sponsors, where there may be companies that have a similar interest in a specific area. And we found success where some companies were able to sponsor content for us, where they would produce and write some of the content, give us some content, and we can do some co-branded products that we then sell and have, rev share arrangements in place. And then some may even sponsor labs where we can incorporate some real world application exercises where that company might even do some screen recording of how they use a particular software or methodology that we've explained in a course, in one of our courses, so that our members, our learners can see it alive in a real life setting and context.
Well, it sounds like, depending on the subject, of course, and the culture and the various different elements that are involved, it's not necessarily this or that type thing. It's a yes and you do a make and partner decision for a particular course.
That's right.
Series or whatever.
We use those different combinations all the time.
Okay.
So we could, do a build and a partnership. We could do a buy and a partnership or sponsorship. And so there's just so many different creative approaches you can take with these curriculum design decisions.
Wow. That's a big learning curve. How have you found your audience reacting to these kinds of?
Yeah, so one of the big recommendations that I would make to your audience is to invest in setting up focus groups. That's one of the biggest successes we had last year, was creating a Learning Champions group within which is a subset of our members at our association, who volunteered to take and complete some of our learning courses, give us real-time feedback through a polling mechanism that we put in place. And then we were able to have different subgroups of those people, of those members, to be able to discuss for a 30-minute session each month their feedback that we received when they completed some of our on-demand learning. So we were able to ask them some targeted questions based on the data that we received. And it really opened up a tremendous amount of insight, so that we're always reviewing and considering how do we update and upgrade our best-in-class standards for creating these learning solutions. What is of most value? And that is a key component to the world of learning production and the world of business, really globally at this point, is value. And when you think about lean methodology, it's all grounded on what do your customers, what do your members value.
And people really do want to be heard, don't they?
And people really do want to be heard, and we want to hear from them. And when you think about design thinking, that's the first phase of design thinking, is empathize with your customers, with your members, and then you're able to define problems and then think about prototyping and solving those problems.
Well, you talked about getting feedback and polling your audience and stuff like that. What recommendations might you give to someone stepping into your own shoes as a senior leader of learning and assessment?
Yeah. Build your Rolodex. Build your Rolodex. And so, you started off this segment, explaining how we came across each other, 10, 11 years ago. I remember I went to a Munch and Mingle, in the neighborhood that I lived in for our local ATD chapter, and I just was really impressed with the staff that were there and the board members, and got engaged, and then joined the board a year later, and then matriculated up through chapter president in 2015. And so I've gotten so much out of our local ATD chapter, and there's a lot of other professional associations for learning and development, people, but there's so much that can come from the affiliation in terms of recruiting staff members that, for open positions, open full-time positions you might have, but then also finding some independent contractors that you could use in a pinch during busy season. Mm-hmm. We've done all of that. It's worked extremely well. And, even just vetting vendors and exploring, some alternatives. quick story, real story. So when I first started at our organization, we used a vendor. Of course, I won't name names, but we got a quote for a $50,000 proposal for some scripts that we sent them. I asked around through the professional association, who are you guys using for voice talent? You know, we've got one, but you know, it's getting kind of pricey. They recommended, you know, a couple different names. I found one of those, submitted the same scripts that produced a $50,000 quote. The quote was $5,000 and similar quality. So to go from a $50,000 quote to a $5,000 quote, same number of scripts for a curriculum design and similar quality. So you can imagine the smile on my face and my bosses and upline face.
Yeah, maybe you got a bonus because you saved the company so much money.
Well, that was a long time ago, so I can't recall, but I know that it definitely was a win-win for all of us, and you know, significant savings. And then we took that even a step further. We worked with that vendor that, you know, produced great quality you know, voiceover narration for us for years. But all of that just came from me shopping around and asking around from colleagues and peers in our professional association. You know, so I've recruited, you know, and been able to fill full-time openings from people from our professional association chapter, recruited independent contractors, been able to get really transformational, you know, recommendations and referrals, you know, to our bottom line of vendors. And it's just, you know, something, and when you think about who you want on your team and who you want to collaborate with, the professional associations have people that are passionate, that come after their full-time jobs to these monthly meetings and munch and mingles, and they're serious. And so there's a wealth of, you know, characteristics that you would probably desire from people that are very active in these local professional.
Well, and that networking activity really helps you to size people up, because it really is about even building your own team. It's about culture,
It's
about fit,
Yes.
about whether those personalities are going to mesh with the other team members that you already have.
That's right.
And that sort of thing.
Yeah, and when you're thinking about scaling, independent contractors can help you scale, but then also partnering, collaborating with large, you know, learning providers that have the muscle, that have the army, that have the reach, that can be very significant in achieving organizational goals as well. Scalability, and then also being able to, as an organization, build in that fluidity to be able to respond to, you know, new opportunities that might come. Think about the pandemic and how so much of learning had to be pivoted to virtual.
It's changed the world, hasn't it?
It's changed the world, absolutely.
Well, how has that worked for you, going to a virtual team? And you've been working yourself or virtual for a long while now.
That's right. Yeah, we have to be a lot more intentional about culture, and, you know, put a lot more things in place to heighten the engagement. And so that goes not only with our, you know, internal team members, but then also with engaging our members and customers, and thinking about the absolute best practices for designing virtual training, virtual learning solutions, synchronous events, blending different modalities together, thinking about clustering different assets, because it's all about behavior change. And, you know, but I think that a winning formula and equation is that content plus engagement plus transferability equals value to customers and members in our association. So to expand on it a little bit more, so we've heard content is king and queen, right? Typically,
King
engagement, right? King and queen. and engagement is super important, but then also transferability. What will I be able to do differently back at in my role within my organization as a result of the knowledge and skills that I've gained from you as a learning provider? We think about that all the time, so that, you know, we're deciding, you know, how can we make learning sticky? How can we build in some spaced repetition, for example? You completed a 2-day workshop, that's great. Great facilitator, great discussions, you learned a lot, but then that forgetting curve starts kicking in. That Ebbinghaus forgetting curve is science, it's brain-based science. Some of these old adages, if you don't use it, you what? You lose it, right? Are very true and grounded in, you know, like science. And so, that clock starts ticking in the forgetting curve. So how can we maybe send out via text message or at a minimum email some quick reinforcement concepts, some knowledge check questions that just kind of help the brain to recall those key concepts that were covered, some short scenarios, right, to think about it from an application perspective. Okay, these were a few key concepts from the 2-day workshop you attended. Each day or for a few times each week, please take 3 to 5 minutes to work out a short scenario of how these concepts can be applied in a real world.
I might suggest that, and I don't want to stereotype, but I would guess that some of the content for accountants is not the most exciting that you might.
that was
So
actually,
engagement really is something that you really need to keep their attention.
Absolutely. That was one of my interview questions 11 years ago, actually, was, what do you think the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges might be, if you get this job here? I said, making accounting content interesting and creative and compelling. But, especially with the pace of change, how the world is transforming, when we think about like cybersecurity and privacy and robotics automation and how all of those things are now factored into.
Those are survival issues.
Those are survival issues and are important, and is important now than ever with the accounting and finance profession, because you think about breaches and the financial implications of breaches from companies being hacked, and thinking about risk mitigation strategies and the rising role of the CFO and all these different skills that weren't really associated with accounting and finance, data analytics, right? ESG and the rise of that from an environmental, social, and governance
And
perspective.
people are still trying to figure that out.
And people are still trying to figure it out. And so there's so many different complementary topics that are that lend themselves to a lot of creative and compelling design from a learning perspective, that have now carried over into accounting and finance, where now more than ever we're able to make our learning very creative, compelling, and impactful.
Well, let me say, Michael, that I'm in awe of your journey and what I have observed of your growth as a leader.
Thank you.
Really, I am. But I have an interesting, maybe on the light side, question for you to follow that up with. If you could pick a mentor, living or dead, if you could pick a mentor to take you through the next 5 years of your career journey, who might that be and why?
Yeah. So very, very interesting question. I would have to say Denzel Washington. The living legend, Academy Award winning actor. He has been in over 57 movies, and since 1977. And when you think about transformation, that's a big buzzword, right? Transformation is here. And so when you hear these phrases like professionals need to be able to unlearn and relearn and transform themselves by acquiring new skills, right? And stretching themselves and helping organizations to transform. So individual professionals have to transform. What he's been able to do as an actor and transforming himself in so many different types of roles.
Oh, yes.
Over the decades, it's mind-blowing. He's not typecasted. He's able to transform into so many different types of roles, to where it's like, if he can mentor me and help me get prepared for the coming years, like he prepares for these big-time movie roles. And he's got one coming out in the next 2 weeks, I believe.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Equalizer 3, I believe. And so,
That's got to be my favorite. It's
Oh,
the
really?
Equalizer series.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So his ability to transform as an actor, I think, would help any of us in preparing and developing ourselves to transform to meet the needs of the global workforce.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming out today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just a quick plug. So, I appreciate you inviting me to be a guest on your podcast, and I'm going to invite you to be a guest on mine as well. So mine will launch on LinkedIn Live starting in October.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's going to be called Smart Learning for Today's Workforce. So we'll think about the global workforce and strategies for scaling it, for making it your learning modernized and measurable, but then also right-sized and transferable.
Well, we'll look forward to that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Thanks for joining us today for Timely Text Podcast, Leading L&D. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and give us 5 stars. Even better yet, enter your comments to the LinkedIn post and tell us what we might do better next time.